From the biggest matches to the hottest takes, Jonathan Turner and Nathan Wenger bring you the stories, the analysis, and the edge you won't get anywhere else. Streaming live weekdays at 9 a.m. on YouTube, Roku TV, Facebook, Twitter, and all major platforms. No filters, no fluff, just real talk, real soccer. This is Inside the Game.
Are you ready to create unforgettable moments for your audience? NSN offers professional live streaming and full broadcast services tailored to your needs. From high-quality production to exceptional coverage, we ensure your game or event becomes a spectacle to remember. Book your next game with us today. Call 586-304-4405 to schedule your broadcast and let NSN bring the action to life like never before.
Welcome into our PMG studios here in Shelby Township, Michigan, and tonight we've got a special report from you in regards to the inaugural North American Soccer Expo. My name is Jonathan Turner alongside Ryan Glinski. You are watching this on the National Soccer Network exclusively on Roku TV. Now, Ryan, we had a chance to meet with a number of influential people, exhibitors, and presenters at the North American Soccer Expo this past weekend. What did you take away from that?
What I took away was everyone getting together, going into one place, and just teaching each other different things, different aspects of the game, and how to grow their clubs, teams, and just overall the game of soccer on the national, international level.
It was a fantastic event. We had a chance to be there on Podcast Row. We had a chance to talk with the likes of Alexi Lawless, Luis Robles, a former MLS goalkeeper, Kim Sutton, the Chico women's soccer head coach, along with Jen Klein, and so many more. But first off, we had a chance to sit down with Kim Sutton, the head coach of the Chico women's soccer program, and our very own Noah Drury had the privilege of having a conversation.
Classroom session basically covered the basic principles of defending, so we broke things down in a very simplistic form, all the way from basic definitions, areas of the field, thirds of the field, and what principles apply to those thirds of the field. So the classroom session kind of covered all areas and vocabulary and things that we do with our team. And then transitioning to the field session, we worked on kind of the attacking third, defending in the attacking third, so interrupting, disrupting, and winning the ball so you can score goals. So we're just trying to teach how the principles apply in that part of the field, the risk versus reward of getting in hard, and the coordination of a first defender with a second defender, deeper defenders away from the ball, and how we can coordinate and work as a team.
And you've been coaching soccer for 35 years. We talked about this before.
Yeah.
5 years at the junior college level and then 30 at the NCAA Division II level.
Yeah.
What made you want to become a soccer coach?
Well, I grew up playing soccer my whole life, like everybody does, and never thought I was going to be a coach. Kind of got into it by default and loved the sport and loved the game. And when I got into coaching, I super passion for it and enjoyed the relationships with the players. I think that's why I've stayed as a Division II coach, that the relationships I can develop, bringing in athletes for 4 years and stuff, it's just been a pleasure to be doing it as long as I have. I can't believe I'm still here doing it.
So you go to the junior college. What's the difference between coaching at a junior college and then a NCAA Division II program? I know it's been some time, and it might be a little bit different now, but from your perspective and your experience, how does that look?
Back then, junior college, everything was very local. So just recruiting local, matches were played on Tuesdays and Fridays, so I had like the weekends off. And, having an athlete for 2 years, they were young and you were still developing them. So you were recruiting and promoting them to the next level. So in that sense, it was very different. I got to a point where I didn't feel like my career was developing anymore, and I felt very stuck in the same rhythm every year after year, so I wanted the challenge of having athletes for 4 years in the next level.
And then when you're recruiting athletes for 4 years, what are you looking for, especially nowadays when you're recruiting and also in the transfer portal as well?
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of having kids for 4 years, so I'm predominantly a freshman recruiter. Character, personality are at the top of my list, and do they have great grit and work ethic? Because if they have those tools, if they're bought into our program and our philosophy and our style and our standards, and they have great work ethic, then we can teach them just about everything else. So the recruiting for us, it's a long process. We really want to get to know them and their personalities, what their family background's like, and then obviously see them and evaluate them as a soccer player and see them, minimum of 6 or 7 times if we can, because seeing consistencies, and one day they might be great and the next day not so great. So those are kind of some of the things we're starting to look for.
And you look at the Division II and Division III and NAIA levels, you're typically looking more for it's a lot of players. It is possible, and it does happen. A lot of players are looking to play soccer for 4 years and maybe go pro, or maybe find their next step in a different adventure that doesn't involve soccer or get into soccer coaching. But it's still traditional recruiting compared to a Division I level where money starts to become more on the table.
Yeah. For now it is.
Yeah, right, exactly.
It might start changing, and we'll see how the future goes for the recruiting process. But yeah, I feel like I haven't changed a lot in terms of how we recruit, where we recruit, the process. The money for us has kind of stayed the same. We have scholarships, and we offer those out. I'm a merit-based coach, so as you develop and help the program, we're going to reward you. So that's how that kind of works for us. But yeah, in that sense, I think Division II has for now remained similar to how it's been for the last 20 years.
And then going more into recruiting, are you more of a trying to keep it local? Do you have like a specific region on the West Coast that you try to recruit? Or are you a national-based recruiter?
Yeah, California, the talent base is so tremendous that we
Right.
don't really need to go outside the state, and it's such a big state. We do recruit from Oregon, Washington, local Arizona kind of areas. We don't go far outside of that because we just really don't need to. And our scholarship dollars are very limited, so it's very expensive if you come. I mean, it's a state school, so it's a relatively inexpensive in comparison, but yeah, we stay mostly local to the state of California.
What is one of the challenges when you first started coaching that you feel like maybe you not necessarily excel, but you've really, gave it attention and pushed forward and, have gotten better development in that skill as a coach?
I think developing the individuals, when I was much younger, I just, you're learning by trial and error.
Yep.
And, I really have developing their skills as leaders, coordinating and communicating. And, now it's changed a little bit because of the phones. They don't know how to look each other in the eye and chat and have those kind of conversations. We call them coffee conversations. Whether it's if someone says I need to have a coffee conversation, it might be uncomfortable. And so they already know that. But learning tools and developing them as individuals, I think, is something I've really embraced as a coach and as part of who we are as a Chico State family and the Wildcat family. We really work on developing relationships and having those tools so when they get into the workforce, they know how to have a hard conversation, whether it's with family or workforce, that they can have those skills and muddle through them as best they can. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm having a blank here. I wanted to ask this. When did you have that moment in your coaching career when you were like, I belong here?
That's a good question. I think when I was younger, I got kind of thrust into being a head coach at a very young, like at 22, 23 years old, after doing a little high school. And I didn't really know what I was doing, and I think it takes longer than people think, especially when you develop programs. I think when I was at Humboldt State at a Division II, 3 or 4 years in, and I started being able to identify what tools would work at that level and really being myself took a while. And then developing the team around my philosophy and my values, I think, it takes a while. So somewhere after 5 or 6 years, I felt like, this is really a lifestyle I like. I love what I'm doing, and I found my niche in it. And then it was great, even better from there.
You've been at Chico State for a long time. This is your 25th season.
Yes.
You have over 200 career wins there. You've been to multiple NCAA national Division II national tournament appearances, and also have won your conference as well. Just when you try to look at it, not in the present mind, and just kind of pull yourself back, what do you look at your accomplishments as a coach at Chico State?
Well, that's a good question. People always ask, what was your most successful year? And I said, it depends on how you measure that. We went to the Final Four in 2011, and, I don't think I knew in the moment how great that was of a team and leaders and what we had really built. And I think looking back now, the teams that were measured, and certainly by success and wins and achieving NCAA playoffs and those kind of accolades. But when the alumni come back and I hear them talk about their experiences, that's the most rewarding part for me, because I get to hear how it's affected their lives and the stories they tell. And it's hardly ever about soccer. It's about the pillow fight we had in the hotel room, the moments where we did shenanigans and silly things, and sweating out fitness tests, and so that part's really enjoyable for me. So hearing back from players after all these years is really enjoyable and really a fun part of it now.
If you listen to a lot of coaches talk in general just about their players at the college level, maybe not more NFL, it's more business and that, but at college and high school especially, you talk about those moments, maybe not necessarily on the field, unless it's a special moment, like you get a game-winning goal in the 90th minute or something of that sort. But you hear a lot of these coaches talk about just these random moments. I remember Ryan Day, the Ohio State national championship coach, this past season, he talked about he was in play when they went in the playoffs. He would spend times in the players' room and just chat and have these conversations and stuff. And it's those moments that really, make a team special, when you're able to connect off the field as well and like hanging out with each other. There was someone I was talking to actually just like this past year about how if you don't like playing with your team, you're probably not going to have a lot of success. So, to be able to develop those types of teams and have your leadership, and then also develop the players into having leadership, and just being able to have good relationships and take those younger players under their wing, it creates something special there. So
very much. We do a lot of time bonding. I always say shenanigans. We moments at practice where you can do something fun, but they also have to remember they're there to play soccer, and we're trying to win on game day. So kind of finding that balance and that blend is getting more challenging, to be demanding on them. So we say work hard, play hard, right? So no matter what we do, we're going to be the best at it, whether it's fundraising or slip and sliding or playing soccer. So developing that kind of mentality is really a fun part of it, and then enjoying all those moments of fun things.
A great conversation with Kim Sutton and our very own Noah Drury. When we come back here, we'll sit down with Sporting KC and Angel Revillo and Luis Pacheco as they talk about developing center backs in 2025. We'll be right back.
The game is evolved. It's always evolving, and in our environment, in our space, we're trying to develop players for the first team. So we got to see how the game is moving. And you're right. Nowadays, center backs, and when we did the stats, they are involved in 25% of the passes of a team. But we're talking about the top, when you talk about the top 6 teams in the EPL, right? The Liverpools, the Man Cities, the Man United, the Chelseas. Those are the teams that are consistently playing out of the back, and the center backs are actually the ones. The center backs are actually the ones that are in possession or making passes, 1 out of 4 passes in a game. So yes, it is a very important role nowadays, and our job is to try to help those players elevate their game in the build-up play.
And your thoughts on this? Obviously, you're talking about. 25% is a significant number. I mean, that's a lot. I mean, your best players in the world aren't getting that many touches, right? You're talking about Lionel Messi. Now, he might be obviously an anomaly in that, but your best players are not seeing the ball that much in a game, right? So, and we're talking about center backs as a whole. That most teams are playing a 2 center back system, right? I'm not saying you don't see 1 center back, but in most cases you see 4 in the back, right, and 2 which are center backs. So we're talking about those 2 players combined make up 25% of passes in a game.
Correct.
That's a strong number, and more importantly, what we as in this culture, I know obviously across in Europe and other parts of the world, building out of the back was kind of like their thing, right? We either started taking it over here in the late 90s and early 2000s, where we really started to adopt the idea that we should be building out of the back. And obviously, it's risk reward, right? There's a lot of clubs like Columbus Crew, for example. They live and die by playing out of the back, right, and to a fault. And their goalkeepers will hang on to the ball for a long period of time inside the 6. So, from a perspective of that standpoint, how are you handling that management, the risk reward aspect? Because with playing from the back, there's also this opportunity where you make a mistake, a miscue, and it can be right back down your throat, and you're just giving away a goal, a really good opportunity that can result in a goal.
Yeah. No. There's a lot to that, of course. So when we talk about playing out of the back and the percentage of the amount of passes that the center backs are involved in, it's gone much higher than what it was 30 years ago. And to your point earlier, the expectation of the center back has evolved. It's also interesting how the cycles move. So 10, 15 years ago, the center backs were constantly playing from their own box. Now the pressure changes, so the pressure is really high, so as soon as the first ball goes, the pressure is already coming at you. Then the evolution of pressure has changed because people are willing to go over the line of pressure a little bit more now. So now the advancement of where those players are playing most of their passes from is not necessarily right on their goal line, it's a little bit higher up. So then you add that piece to what else does a defender do, and that's where you have to recognize, okay, let's not lose what they did in the past. Let's add and evolve to what the game actually asks of them now, which makes them more of a complete player, where maybe just the hard guy might not be good enough today, unless worked on with some of the things that Angel was saying is maybe you need to put a little bit of emphasis on your ability to play out of the back. And there are teams that can play from their own goal. There are teams that might be better at playing higher up the field with their center backs. There are players that might be capable of it all, and now it's us to find those players and help them find success on the field.
No, it's a great point. And the question I have now is, as the game has evolved, we've also seen, obviously, changes that have affected and impacted the younger generation of player, right? With the introduction of the rule that you couldn't head the ball, right, for the longest time, and how that's changed how players are coming into an environment now only having a short period of time to learn how to head the ball the right way. Growing up, there was no restrictions whatsoever for me to play, and I'm sure there weren't for you as well. Have you guys seen that at all? Have you seen that impact of not being able to head the ball until 12 or 13 years old and how that's impacting your game now?
Yeah, I mean, some of our older players don't know how to head the ball. They don't know how to time the heading of the ball. And so I always think about, and Luis, my colleagues from Mexico, you watch Mexican players, sometimes they're not the biggest, but they're always winning headers. And it's a skill, it's an art, and they're really good at it. So I agree with you. I think when it comes down to heading the ball, the technique for heading the ball, I think if you teach it younger, you have actually less concussions because it's an art. You have to put your whole body, your neck, your shoulders, all that stuff into it. But yes, and when you attach that to the center back, so you say risk reward. Nowadays, center backs want to play out of the back. It's like a norm because they watch it all the time on TV. It's like, no, I want to play. Coach, why are we not playing out of the back? Why are we going long? So sometimes even our own players are forcing us to continue to play out of the back, which is nice. So the risk reward kind of goes out the window. It's a little bit of peer pressure. Say, no, the kids want to do it. They're into it. Let's do it.
I mean, yeah, having player buy-in is huge, right? I can only imagine. And when you think about it from the standpoint, too, the roles in soccer have changed tremendously. We can talk about center backs in every role. I mean, if you were a right back growing up for me, you were a right back. Right now, you're not a right back, you're a center back. You're going to interchange into a holding midfielder. You might be a winger. I mean, your role is constantly changing in any given game. And then understanding when and when not to release and to get back in your position, that is so important. And your center backs, two of them combined are typically, again, like the generals of that back line. They lead a lot of the game, which is why they have a huge part of that possession as far as passing and whatnot. But how about understanding when and when not to go and to release? And obviously dropping back and getting forward. All those things are interchangeable. How has that evolved over the years? And more importantly, how do you as a coaching staff and trying to develop the player, trying to get them to understand that, hey, this is the right time to go, this is the right time not to go?
Yeah, a big piece of what we spoke about today was how are you perceiving the game? So, example, if my head is down, my perception of the game is very limited. And we always talk as coaches about players, play with your head up. Okay, if my head up, my perception, what I'm seeing, is much, much more broad. Then the next question becomes, once you are now seeing or looking in a certain direction, what are the things that are going to help you make a decision? So the perception then leads to the decision. And now you're also looking at the players. Are they capable of executing that action correctly? So when you look at a player from that aspect, then you start looking at, okay, how do you coach it? Well, space, time, and numbers. If you have space, then you're capable of taking that space. If you don't have space, but you have a number advantage, still an area to maybe keep the ball. If you're down a man, maybe not an area to have to use that risk. So then those are the things that you're helping them recognize with the perception piece, space, time, and numbers.
No, it's really good. Again, it's something that I think about this game and think about how it's constantly, we've talked about evolving, right? And understanding when and when not to go. The mindset of being a center back is a unique one, or just like a goalkeeper is a unique mindset. We see a lot of players who maybe start off their career as attackers. And then we move them into a center back role, right? Do you find a lot of success with taking a player who's maybe a striker, and now they make that center back role? Is that something that we see a lot more of now today than we've ever seen, or is it kind of more balanced?
That's actually something that happens quite a bit. It used to be more often, happen more often in the past, and I remember a lot of forwards that they were good because they're the biggest, the strongest, the fastest, but then they didn't have, sometimes as the level gets higher, the intelligence and the cleanness of their technique is not as good, so then they drop into a center back position, It is still happening now. Ian James, you want to talk about Ian James?
Yeah, so Ian James is a player that he's from Minnesota, and through his time in Minnesota, he would be center back, center forward, center back, center forward. He played futsal, which is, at those ages, 12, 13, 14, fantastic for them to play. So in playing in futsal, he was always higher up and scoring the goals. Well, when he comes to us, at 14 years old, we start thinking, okay, you have those abilities, but you have more of a center back profile. Then we look at the characteristics of what we think for a certain position, and we look at the center back and we look at the forward, and we try to match where are you in your abilities of those. Sure, you can play both, but you're really, really good at one, you're okay at the other. And that's what helps us be able to help the players define their best position.
Thank you, Angel Revillo and Luis Pacheco of Sporting KC. That was a phenomenal conversation. What we have next?
Coming up next, we've got Oakland County FC, who plays in the USL League Two Great Lakes Division. I sat down with Dominic Troya and Steve Walker, and we'll see that on the other side of this break.
The Flint City Bucks are Michigan's top soccer franchise with 4 national championships, 9 conference titles, and 15 Great Lakes Division titles. They have produced 107 players for Major League Soccer, and they focus on attracting top talent and shaping soccer's future. Michigan Bucks Academy joins NLS Next new competition tier starting in September of 2025. This offers elevated levels of play and flexibility for high school participation. The Academy will provide premier development, high-performance training, and exposure to scouts through regional tournaments and MLS Next events. For more information on tryouts, training programs, and key updates as we prepare for our first season in MLS Next new tier, visit MichiganBucksAcademy.com.
When we look at this Great Lakes division, it's weird because we've seen the likes of Midwest United, which they always start their season off really quick, right? They front load a bunch of games on the front end, right? And then we saw it last year. We saw Flint again. They kind of wait on the end, right? So you're seeing their last games while everybody else has kind of finished up their season. You know, they still have a couple games ahead of them, and then they come out on top in this Great Lakes division. You know, we saw Lansing City take a complete and utter drop this year, right? They finished dead last. They did not win a single game in that division at all, which is obviously not like them and not like that organization. Trying to manage this Great Lakes has been kind of a weird one the last couple of years. And you guys are kind of like right in the middle. I mean, you haven't quite eclipsed the top 3 yet. You know, you're getting closer and closer every year. Like, what do you think has to happen for you guys to get just over that hump into the top 3, top 2?
I mean, we've talked a little bit about as a staff and obviously as an ownership group with Dom and Dennis about there's a couple of games that the smallest of small margins. You know, we looked at the Indiana game at home was an example. We were winning 2-0. We ended up losing that 3-2. You know, Midwest away, we were 1-1 tied. Ended up going to a 2-1 loss right at the end. You know, and then we had a chance right at the end of the Midwest game. You know, where we were tied 1-1 and possibly could have won it at the end. So those just small little scenarios, small little margins that kind of get you over to that next kind of step. And again, it's no secret sauce like anything else. I think we're getting there. And again, if we can make sure that we have the right environment to bring in that next level of player. You know, obviously that keeps improving. I do think looking at the other divisions around the other conferences, I do think the Great Lakes Conference is probably one of the top 2 as far as difficult. I mean, like you said, obviously you've got the Bucks, Midwest. Last couple of years have been exceptionally good. I think the job that Luke's done over there is exceptionally good with the players he's been able to bring in and keep. I think Ann Arbor do a very good job every year. They're always a very consistent team. I think Rod does a fantastic job there. You know, Kalamazoo, they changed coaches this year. You know, they were, always a difficult team to play against. So, and I think Lansing, I agree with you. I think it kind of took everybody a bit by surprise. I think obviously when James came in to maybe steady the ship a little bit, and I obviously expect them to get a lot better next year. And then Northern Indiana, I mean, you can never take them lightly at all. I was told at the beginning before they came in they could be a problem, and they did prove to be a problem for quite a few teams. So
little bit of a disruptor, right? Because again, they started off kind of slow, and then obviously you guys had that 2-0 lead at home, and then ultimately fell short 3-2. And you talk about it. This game, as simple as complicated as we make this game, it really is simple, right? You have to win by 1 goal, right, in order to win the game. And
these moments,
these single moments that happen, these moments where, and again, we can talk about. I mean, your roster is made up of really quality players, right? And there's high quality players across this entire league. And I don't know if one team has more advantage than the other. I think you can argue about Flint and how they house players. That's another level. But you guys, too, are also doing some things differently with how you organize and manage your teams, which puts you in a position to keep that cohesive unit, because that's really, to be fair, is like the X factor in winning games at this level, is to have a team that's all on the same page, playing at the same level, and all going in the same direction at the same time.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's pretty difficult just because the short time frame you have them. They kind of come in right before the season starts. We actually didn't start our first game until the 17th or something, just so we could get most of our squad in there. We had some guys that weren't going to be in there till late. So that short window makes it really hard. We do house guys now. I think we had 6 or 7 housed this year from out of state, and it was a really good experience. I think they enjoyed it. We did a lot of team events. We did like an adult laser tag. We took them to a Michigan Combat. We did countless team dinners. The films, we have food for them. Team bus was new this year. We brought in a team bus. So it's all the things we're trying to piece together for that experience. So even our guys can go and tell other people they know, like, hey, this experience at Oakland County was so good. I want to come back, but you should come with me. And then we can start really building some momentum. So.
Soccer in this country is really fragmented, but I actually think it's extremely fragmented here in Metro Detroit, right? You have a lot of options to watch soccer. Now, obviously, at a high level, you've got Championship in Detroit City SC, and then from there, you've got USL 2 and a bunch of other leagues all kind of intermixed. And I still think the USL League 2 and USLW are by far and large the best amateur pre-professional league in the country, right? And obviously, for obvious reasons, I mean, you have to pay a high price tag to get in that league, and so that's going to maybe obviously weed out some of the clubs that maybe can't be there in the first place. But looking at how fragmented soccer is, how does Oakland County get more fans? Because if you live in Oakland County, you've got Union FC Macomb within 30 minutes of you. You've got AFC Ann Arbor. You've got Lansing, right? Then you throw in like the Midwest Premier League teams, like in Livonia City, and you got UPSL teams. Everyone is fighting for a chance to have people come to their games on a Saturday night. How do you battle that? Because that is, to be fair, I think is the biggest battle, is trying to get people to come and support you when there's so many options, and then you throw in baseball and all the other sports that are available.
I think a good strategy, and especially it's one that we've been kind of looking at, is the more people that you can get to return. So it's not just getting X amount of fans for, say, your first game. The amount of those fans that will start coming to all the games to follow a player or to follow the team will just start adding. That's how you start accumulating. So every game we had a consistent, decent number of fans, but it wasn't going up because I don't think it was the same people coming each time. I think it was kind of new ones come in, new ones come out, new ones come in. So I think if you can really start building some kind of storyline that really makes it stand out as something different, like I think it'll bring more people to, I got to go for the rest of it. I got to go to the next game. I got to see what they're going to next. They're at this record. I got to go. Like, the more people we get really engaged with how the team is doing, I think will be a little X factor. I mean, we provide so much stuff at the game days that I don't think it's that people wouldn't want to come. It's spreading the word, which of course is difficult to do with all these teams. But like I said, I think it's the more people we can get to really start grabbing on and then just add to it each time. So. Well,
because you're not necessarily even competing with other soccer. You're competing with the summer, right? And again, if you are getting out on a weekend and you want to go up north, you're not going to stay back. Nothing against Oakland County or Flint or anything. If I'm going to the beach, I'm going to the beach, right?
Right. Well, that was the other thing. Like when we did our scheduling meeting, almost all of our home games, bar maybe one Friday game, we had all Saturday games. In hopes that hey, maybe Saturday nights we can really hone in on getting people for their Saturday nights to come spend it with us in the summer. So maybe it's something like that where it's days of the weeks and times, and it's a weird one.
It's almost like, hey, could we have like in the winter time when everyone wants to get out,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Again, it's that balance trying to find, and that's honestly probably one of the biggest challenges facing amateur soccer in this country is the support, right? How do you get support? Because you watch Vermont Green who's playing in the national championship tonight, and their crowd is unbelievable. They're 5,000-6,000 people. I mean, it is one of the biggest crowds, and we joked around about it throughout the week about how like there's nothing to do in Vermont except go to this game and maybe watch the maple syrup dripping out of a tree. But outside of that,
I think they had Bernie Sanders putting something out there as well about it, promoting them as well to try and get more people.
He will actually be there again tonight. So.
Oh, he will. Perfect.
but what do you do in Vermont? Well, you go watch Vermont Green, right? But that's what you do. And so 4,000 or 5,000 people coming to a game, and for a lot of teams, like even like you, having 5,000 people come to one of your games would be amazing, right? The atmosphere,
that would be amazing,
right? I mean, but you're still drawing 500-600 people to a game, 700 people to a game, and that's not a bad number. That's a really good number, a strong number when teams are only maybe drawing a couple hundred. Right.
Yeah, no, I agree. And like I said, I think the game day is set up there for that. We're ready for more fans, which is nice. We're not in the position where it's like, oh, if we get more fans, we got to do this. Like, we're kind of ready for that. We just need to get it. So,
awesome. What does next year look like for you guys? I know we're the summer's coming to an end. I know we're looking forward to next year, but what does next year look like? Have you started talking about what next year could look like and what you want to try to accomplish?
In a simple term that Dennis would want me to use is bigger and better. He loves the bigger and better. From last year, I think, to this year was a bigger, better step, and then I think it's just going to be building each year. I mean, he can speak on some stuff too if he wants.
I mean, I think for me, it's again, obviously the guys are getting into college now, so making sure that we've sat down and kind of figured out the players that we're looking to try and bring back into the program next year, and then obviously now it's getting to certain college games, getting to certain games to watch certain players play, and then obviously you start those conversations October, November time as their seasons are starting to come to close. They're already kind of looking ahead of time of where they're going to go. So, I mean, it's just obviously manifesting relationships that we've built already with the players, making sure that obviously we're keeping in touch with them. I mean, already this coming Friday, Oakland Western. That's already the first game on the plan. That's a great game to go and watch already from the start. So, and again, it'll be full of players that have played for us over the summer. So it'd be good to see some of the guys and how their pre-season have been going. So, yeah, planning already started. For next summer. I think we kind of got within touching distance, not quite there. I think hopefully next summer we can build on that, and now we're competing with the Bucks and the Midwests, and we're playing further on into the summer. So,
thank you, Dominic and Steve, for that great conversation about the game of soccer, and more importantly about Oakland County SC in the USL League 2. Who do we got coming up next?
We have Jen Klein, University of Michigan women's head soccer coach. So don't go away.
Don't like sharing your pint? Then share the new Scoopapalooza.
You could say it's just a game. You could say it's just a drink. After all, when people come together to be stewards of the earth, what could be more just?
To help with in-game kind of execution and more specifically focusing on coaching to principals to help you do that. So I shared with everyone there just what we did this week. I mean, we're in our first week of preseason, so we're in it preparing for the season and what we've done all week in terms of teaching and coaching our principles of play out of possession in an attacking transition, and walked them through everything we did this week.
So very cool. So the women's game has changed tremendously over the years, specifically in the college game. And I'd love for you to talk about a little bit about that for a moment, because, again, the college experience today is vastly different than it was even 8 years ago when you took over at University of Michigan. So talk about that a bit, and how does that kind of tie into what you talked about today?
Yeah, so I think, a big thing is that the athlete has changed. I think probably every coach that's here, no matter what level that they're coaching at, can say that the athlete has changed in terms of, I think a lot of it is around the growth of the game. The players are becoming more professional. Not that they're becoming professional, but they're becoming more professional in their approach to training and what they're doing, in their club environments, high school environments, all of those things. So I think that has changed the athlete. I think that there's been more of an emphasis on just their mental well-being that's changed the athlete. I think they're also they're able to get so much information about being an athlete, being a soccer player, how to play the game, techniques they should be using. So, their just overall skill level knowledge has changed. And then, just the impact of them as young people in terms of, experiencing and going through COVID and the use of the phone and just, how they're motivated, how they communicate, what skills they have, where they're at in their learning journey, both, physically, mentally, emotionally. So I think that has impacted a lot of it. I think the growth of the game has impacted so much in terms of, how people are trying to play and what they're trying to do, how we go about doing our job. And then college athletics is, growing so much, have these super conferences, the Big Ten, we're across 4 different time zones, probably have one of the toughest leagues in the country. So that definitely has changed. You now have rev share and NIL and all of this stuff that just kind of changes, what we do. And, for better or for worse, it is what it is. And I think, for us as coaches modeling the behavior for our players, you got to just adapt, evolve, and kind of carry on and find a way to be who you are, but, grow with the ever-changing landscape that we are in.
No, that's a great response. And I think about this because, again, as a former coach myself, one of the biggest challenges I had was finding out how to ground players, right? How to not ground them in the sense you're punishing them, but keep them grounded because there's so many distractions. And not only in the sense of what could happen on a soccer field or in that environment, but all around them, right? And so how are you managing that? Because, again, players today, it's all about now the gear hall, right? You get the gear hall and you get the locker room experience, right? And it's everywhere you look. There's a camera, there's a phone, there's everything about this is everyone can see now, which is vastly different than what we experienced as athletes ourselves.
Yeah, listen, when you were in college, you had a disposable camera, and only you and the poor person that had it to actually use it knew what was happening. Now everything lives, digitally, and they want to create that brand out there. I think the big thing is recognizing it's always in to out, and focusing on, your values, what motivates you, your process, as opposed to chasing something that is constantly changing. And the reality is once you get what you've chased, then what? Then you're constantly kind of on this ungettable get, feeding this thing that you'll never actually fill. So having them stay, neutral in the moment of what do they need to do what they want. And so staying neutral within their thinking, but always focusing inside out, and really understanding their values, what's important to them, and then us helping them put, actions and behaviors that are going to help them, achieve those goals that they have.
The women's game in this country is exploding. It's exploding in a way that I think it's really undescribable. And obviously with the Men's World Cup coming up here next year, and that's fantastic. But everything right now is being focused on women's sports and women's soccer, right? And the women's national team has been the gold standard across the world for the longest time. And now you're seeing other countries, because of the United States, are starting to catch up. How do the women in this country and soccer in this country continue to stay on top?
Yeah, I think we need to. I will say this: it's awesome. You know, like how exciting. You know, the how different global events that were happening, the Euros, and you know all of the different events. So it's so fun to see, and to see the attendance and the following and all of that is just awesome because it's trickling down. All that stuff's trickling down. But I think for us as a country, we just need to rethink how we have been doing it. Sometimes we've been so dominant for so long, and what we have been doing has worked. But we just need to grow and evolve just like everything else. And I don't think it's we are one of the biggest things I think we struggle with compared to other countries around the world is how big we are. We are so big, almost little countries within one big country. And there's so many opportunity. There's so many different kind of pathways. And I think we need to embrace all of those pathways. You can't, kind of how do we all work together towards one big goal and basically become a big team. I think right now it's well, my way's better than this way, and we got this. I think because we're so big, because we have so many players playing, because we have so many players with different goals and ambitions and how they want to play the game and participate in the game, I don't think we should make it, don't exclude people, include people, and bring it all together. But the collegiate space has always been something that has allowed for our country to be really successful. We need to find a way to keep them, keep college still involved, but grow the pro game, grow more pathways to get into a pro space, help our pro teams continue to be successful, continue to grow that, and then ultimately your cream of the crop, you get them to the national team, and they're ready to rock and roll. So I think it's going to take all of us, but we just have to rethink a little bit of what we have been doing to stay relevant in the global landscape, because it is the investment around the world is happening, and because of that you're seeing the success of other countries, which is only going to make us better.
No, absolutely. And I oftentimes talk about this with coaches. A lot of times in the world of talent, we think about the best player, right? Well, I think a lot of coaches are looking for the right player, right? The right player for their system, right? And yeah, that might mean that you get the best and the right. They could go hand in hand. But, for the mom and dad out there who are with their child right now, 13, 14 years old, looking to train them up, get them ready for that college experience, going through the recruitment process, what is the advice to the parent out there, to the athlete, to say, hey, we're looking for maybe the right player for Michigan, we're looking for the right player for our system, because I think a lot of times we're so focused on the fastest, the strongest, all these different things, and those things are all what you need, but the right player for your system, the right player for the university, for that team.
Yeah, I think a big thing, we always go back to our values of character, connection, communication, and compete, and using those to help, what we do within our program, but also it helps us find those players that we want to bring into our program. And so using those is really important. But I think, the big thing is it's a journey. And sometimes I think they get caught up in the short term versus the long term. And, there's a lot of like right now, it's like you can't do it all in 1 year. When you get to college, it's what you do in 4 years. And I think that's the same when you're a young player, is that, your experience is different than someone else's experience, and that's not, a bad thing. It's just your unique thing, and recognizing, what you want, and I think keeping an open mind to a lot of different opportunities, because it might be the one that actually is the environment that you need to be successful, to springboard yourself into that next level that you want to go, as opposed to just going where everybody else went because that's what I'm supposed to do. And you kind of trickle out, like go find the place that, fits everything that you want. The Power Four, it's awesome, but it's hard. And, the commitment level, your level of ownership and accountability, like to be successful in it, you have to have that inner drive to be growth, to be like growth, have a growth mindset all throughout, because you're going to hit a challenge, and it's how you view that challenge. It's what's going to keep you kind of moving forward. And so I would say, like, struggle, adversity, challenge, disappointment, those all need to be motivators, not things to avoid.
Thank you very much, Jen, for that conversation. A great chance to listen to a women's head soccer coach here in the Big Ten. Who do you got coming up next?
We have Murray Finley, who he talks about the age grouping and how important it is to play with your friends playing the game of soccer.
From the biggest matches to the hottest takes, Jonathan Turner and Nathan Wenger bring you the stories, the analysis, and the edge you won't get anywhere else. Streaming live weekdays at 9 a.m. on YouTube, Roku TV, Facebook, Twitter, and all major platforms. No filters, no fluff, just real talk, real soccer. This is Inside the Game.
The 2016 year of birth mandate change and its impact on participation, which was an overview of my doctoral thesis. So we opened it up and it was a general discussion. I think the people who came got a lot out of it, just bouncing ideas out, because we're going back to grade age in a year's time, so we all have to go through it again.
So it's been a long time discussion about this, and it seems like every so often we're changing this policy, we're changing this rule in the game of soccer. Obviously, the goal is to benefit the player, right? And that's ultimately the goal. But what is the value to playing at a specific age versus another? I mean, again, playing that your year that you were born, or playing whatever the cycle used to be, what is the value in playing at this current level, this current model?
Well, the value at the initial engagement level, at least, is playing with your friends, because all the research up to this point has suggested that one of the primary drivers of initial engagement in soccer at the younger ages is to play with friends, and specifically play with school friends. When your world is very small, when you're 6 or 7 and 8, friends usually means the kids you go to school with. And when you're inhibiting the ability for young players to play with their school friends, you're inhibiting the initial engagement of soccer at the bottom end, and sustaining engagement as well as they get older.
In this country, the United States, and I know you've been here for a while now, and you understand, I think now looking at it from this perspective, you grew up, though, on the other side of the pond and played on the other side of the pond. So the differences between how we play and manage soccer at the youth level compared to what you grew up in, I imagine vastly different.
It's night and day. It's difficult to explain to people back home, like my family back home, what I do for a living, because this industry just doesn't exist back home. It might to a certain extent, or a lesser extent now, but back when I was growing up, there was very little organised soccer. It certainly wasn't a business as it was now. It was 25 pence a week, which is about 40 cents. Here, every youth soccer club is essentially a small business, and you've got to run a budget and have a marketing department, HR department, and do all those things. And with business and with private equity coming in, you sometimes lose focus that it's all about the kids, right? When people have to protect the bottom line, the board of directors. So I talked a little bit about that, about why we do this and why we should be doing this, whether it's sport for all, we're just using soccer as a vehicle so as many kids as possible can lead an active and healthy lifestyle into adulthood, or are we trying to create professional players at the elite level or for the national teams? And I think a lot of people get those two things wrong because one's an easier sell than the other.
We talk about this a lot on this network about talent identification and how that, I think, is the single greatest problem in this country, and not so much the development of talent, because there's a lot of players out there that I think that we've never even seen before that could potentially play at the next level, right? And they just haven't been found yet because, one, maybe they can't afford it, right? They can't get to their fields, and ultimately trying to identify them. And try to identify, because again, I look at this from the standpoint, soccer, very much like a lot of other environments, is, if you hurt the feelings of a coach or hurt the feelings of an administration, maybe you don't get that chance. Maybe you've been blacklisted to some level, right? We see that all the time at these different levels. How do we manage that aspect of this? Because that's a real thing, I think, that faces a lot of players in this country. Is that, hey, they had a bad day, or they said something they shouldn't say, and now they're not playing. They're not playing in that environment anymore. They had to go to another club. So I'm just curious your thoughts on that.
Well, from the talent ID perspective, of getting the right players to the next level, I think the developmental pyramid as it currently stands, I think, isn't quite as efficient in this country as it should be. And I'm not saying that there's probably no 100% efficient pyramid in the world, but I think the inefficiency comes from what we talked about before. Clubs get the reason they're doing it, their motivation for doing it wrong, because they should be in it for mass participation reasons. They want to introduce soccer to play as many players as possible, but they sell the parents into this prospect of playing at elite level, MLS or women's professional or national teams, whereas they should be bringing players in, as many players as possible, and then when a player outgrows their program, they move them up to the next level in the pyramid, but then you're losing revenue, and businesses don't like to lose revenue, so they make this sales pitch to the parent, we'll get you the national team or we'll get you to an elite levels, so they don't lose players. But for a developmental pyramid to function well, a lot of clubs need to lose players. I mean, that's their whole purpose. Get them in the bottom end, develop them, push them to the next level. But losing players is losing revenue.
So clubs and their mentality are not like what your current school system is, right? Your school system is, hey, you're in kindergarten, you move on to first grade, second grade, keep going, right? And eventually you graduate, and then you move on. Then you're done with that student, you get another student to come in, right? And your clubs, you're right, they want to hang on to these players. I mean, there's a lot of, especially here in Michigan, you've got a lot of clubs that offer MLS Next, right? And that's the academy program for on the boys' side, right? The girls' academy or the boys' academy, and some clubs might not offer that program. They might have the ECNL, they might have MRL, they might have other variations of high-level soccer that's not quite to that level. And clubs are like, hey, we want you to stay within here, so come stay with us, even though that player should go on to MLS Next. That player should go on to that next thing. And now there's this internal struggle about keeping a player, and that player feels guilty to even think about going into that environment when they should feel like this pride and this they should be like, this is awesome, let's go. And send them on their way, but that's not happening.
No. Again, revenue based, and then when it's so fragmented, right? As you know, there's a lot of platforms who claim to be quote unquote elite, and of course, when you have a dozen elite platforms, none of them are elite, right? So, yeah, it's a sales because business, sales and marketing is part of that, social media is part of that, and again, losing players is losing revenue, which is the antithesis of small business,
Exactly. I want to dive in. The World Cup's going to be here in less than a year. I've been asking this question throughout the weekend so far about the U.S. men's national team. And obviously, since we're hosting, we don't have to qualify.
Right.
We know that.
Congratulations.
I know. Like, the question I have is, based on what we've seen so far, the body work out of this team the last 18 months, if they had to qualify, do you think they would?
Yes, they would, because they have a very easy qualifying process through CONCACAF, quite frankly. They would need to drop the ball massively not to qualify through CONCACAF. So I think that's reassuring from the US men's national team standpoint, is you generally know that, of course they messed up a couple of times, recent history, but you generally know they're going to be there whether they host it or not. I used to be Scottish, so I've obviously got a vested interest in that national team. So I could wax lyrical about all the teams they have to get through to get to the World Cup who are significantly stronger than, and I don't mean to be disparaging the CONCACAF.
Yeah.
But I think it's a process, right? That they're not in a good place. Most people would accept that right now. But there's a lot to be said for home advantage, I would say. How much advantage that make, when it depends who they draw, because they could draw a team that's going to pull 50,000 to Kansas City. If they get a country where there's a big population in the States. So, I think I have hope. All you can have at this point.
No, it's great. And my next question is in regards to the MLS. We've been having this debate about, if an 18-year-old player was offered, here in the United States was offered, if all things were created equal, were offered an MLS contract or a Premier League contract. Again, all things created equal, what would that player choose? And we asked this, we polled this on our social medias, and we saw that 81% would go across the pond.
I would say that's probably accurate.
And so I firmly believe that. What does the MLS have to do to create this environment where players want to stay here, and stay in this country and be challenged and grow and get to the best and even compete against the likes of a Premier League team?
Well, MLS, we talked about the issues with the U.S. national team, but the MLS is getting significantly better, I think. You see the results in the last couple of days against the Mexican teams. They've done very well in that competition. I think, to your point about whether they should leave at 18 and go to Europe, obviously there's been some examples of that which have been very successful. But I'm sure for every successful example, you could probably pull in 5 or 6 where it didn't work out because they didn't get the minutes. It's obviously highly competitive depending on where they went, and they might not make it to that first team. It's all about getting minutes, I think, when you're 18 to 21. If you're going somewhere, regardless of the environment, if you're not getting minutes in a professional level against men, you're not really progressing as you should. So maybe going to the MLS, getting in the first team quicker, getting the minutes at a good level. No one's claiming it's English Premiership or La Liga, but it's definitely a good level. I think it would hold its own against most leagues in Europe, bar 1 or 2 or 3. So there's a lot of value to staying in MLS because it means a quicker trajectory to the first team, and I think that's key for young players.
We gon' push it to the limit, we gon' rise together, side by side to the finish. Down the ride forever, when we gon' ride together. So together we ride, certified. And together we ride, we gon' push it to the limit. We gon' rise together, side by side to the finish. Down the ride forever, when we gon' ride together. So together we ride, certified. And together we ride, we gon' push it to the limit. We gon' rise together, side by side to the finish. Down the ride forever.
Experience the thrill of the game like never before with NSN's Game Rewind. Dive into full match commentaries enhanced with cutting-edge dynamic graphics, letting you relive the highs and lows of your favorite matches in astonishing detail. Whether it's a championship win or a legendary play, NSN Game Rewind bridges the past and future with a broadcast experience designed to captivate. Call 586-304-4405 and start watching today.
I would say 2 main projects right now. One is Intentional Sports, which is a big nonprofit on the west side of Chicago, a 10-acre campus that we built a few years ago, raised a bunch of money for, but really to give opportunities to kids who otherwise didn't have a chance to play any sports every day after school. We now serve about 2,500 kids a week, which is amazing. It's an incredible place. And so I'm founder and CEO there, also executive director of a youth club where I live called Palatine Celtic, which is a great community club, been around since 1968. And it's growing like a weed right now in the best possible way. So it's almost like 2 full-time jobs, but it's a good thing. A lot of great kids. So I work with a lot of young people, which keeps me young and also makes me feel old all at the same time.
I can only imagine. And obviously you had to dip into some of the professional game as well. So talk about that a little bit. USL A and
Yep. I played in the A-League 5 seasons, played overseas 1 season in Germany, and then played in the D3 in Chicago a couple years. I actually won the national championship with Chicago Stingers and Chicago Sockers. Went to Indiana Blast and then Charlotte Eagles. So avoided getting a real job as long as I could.
So you're here this weekend. What were you talking about here this afternoon in the MLS classroom?
Yeah, this is something that I'm passionate about that I don't think we talk about enough anymore, or with youth coaches, and it is coaches taking better care of themselves, physically, mentally, and emotionally. You know, we always care for kids. We tell the kids how to run better, how to eat, how to hydrate, how to recover. But you see coaches who are unfortunately pretty unhealthy these days, and there's a burnout rate. And so just some tried and true things that I have learned the hard way over doing this for many, many years of how to take better care of ourselves.
That's a great point. As a former coach myself and a former referee and a player, I can attest to all those different challenges. And you're right. I don't think there's enough time being spent talking about the mental health and the health of coaches as a whole. I want to dive into that for a second, because as a former coach, there were a lot of things that I dealt with from a lot of different angles. You had the player development side. You had the parent interaction, you had some fan interaction, referee. So what is the message to the coach today, how to kind of handle that kind of on a broad stroke?
Yeah, you know, one point I made, it was a great question in there, but, you know, coaches feel like they're pulled in so many different directions, and then by the end of the day, they're just exhausted and they don't exercise, or they haven't prepared, and so they make a last-minute decision and pull into McDonald's or whatever. And we all know that, you know, if you wait until you're starving, it's probably too late, and you're going to get what's quick and easy. So I tell the coaches, if you can spend just a little bit of time preparing, looking ahead at what your week is, or in the morning what your day is. And I you know, a theory I have is we all have about 100 energy points, call it 100 energy points that you have in the day. Where are you going to spend those energy points so that by the end of the day, you're not completely burned out and you get back to whoever, you know, you live with, your friends, your loved ones, your spouse, your kids, and you don't have any energy for them. And that's really the quality of lifetime. So even if you have to write it down on a piece of paper and you write down, here's the 12 things that I'm giving energy to today, make sure you save energy points for what's really important to you.
Oh, it's a great point, because I remember as a coach, we would bring, you know, treats to games, and our players loved the Sour Patch watermelon and strawberry, right? That was, and we brought those things into our environments, and they would pound those things very quickly. And you're about setting the right example, right? And if you're a head coach of obviously, if you're a head coach in an MLS Next Academy, there's a nutritionist that works on staff, right? And that's completely different, but that's not the vast majority of our coaches, right? They're on their own, they're on their environments, and they're trying to find that balance. And you're right, going to a McDonald's can oftentimes be the easiest solution to fulfilling that empty stomach that we're talking about. What about the need about like having smaller meals? So like having a healthier snack bar maybe in your bag, or versus, you know, having like 3 or 4 of those versus that one big terrible meal.
It's huge. One of my points in this talk is metabolism is like a bonfire. And if you think about a fire needs 2 things. It needs oxygen and fuel. The oxygen is the exercise that we do. And no matter what kind of exercise, you know, people ask me, what's the best type of workout? There isn't one. It's whatever you'll actually do. Yeah. Are you a swimmer? Are you a walker? Are you a jogger? Are you a weightlifter? Just do what you'll actually do every day. Do something. But the fuel is, you know, if you don't feed a fire, then it goes out. And your metabolism stops. If you don't eat all day, your metabolism stops. And then you start to see the world in a darker way, and you don't have energy. You might be hangry. You get shorter. You're not a good coach because you're not, you know, you don't have that kind of energy that is fueling your personality, right? And so to keep a fire burning, you need that exercise, that oxygen, but you need good fuel throughout the day. So smaller meals, snacks, healthier things, and all that comes with preparation.
No, it does. And I would imagine, obviously, coach burnout's a real thing.
It is.
Right? It is. Yeah. And how much of being unhealthy is leading to burnout? Is it a big part of this factor, or is it a smaller part?
It is. I think it's a huge part because it's not just the physical side. I talk a lot about the mental and emotional health side. And if you know, we're constantly looking at our stupid phones and then screens, and first thing we look at is the phone, and we see the emails we have to respond to, and then the last thing we look at before we shut our eyes is our phones and the emails we have to respond to, or the text messages or whatever, then that's just a 18-hour day of feeling like you have to do stuff for other people. And you're not taking care of yourself. You're constantly fighting against these you know, devices that are so handy, but they can also be super heavy.
I could only imagine. I want to dive into something that's really, as right now, is a huge topic in this country. It's where everything is in regards to the World Cup here in just a short amount of time. We're a year out, World Cup here in the United States. U.S. men's national team is not where we all want it to be, right? If the U.S. men's national team had to qualify, if they were not hosting, do you think they would qualify?
With our top top roster, yes. I think we qualify. I don't think it's easy, but I think we qualify.
Okay.
I think, the talent is there, and I do think the desire is there. The guys get a bad rap this summer with the Gold Cup and everything, but I think that the leading up to the World Cup, it being hosted here, look, if they can't get up for that, then they don't deserve to be there. That's the pinnacle. I mean, this will be the most watched thing in the history of humankind. So if they can't ramp up these next 12 months, then I don't know that I say it all the time, like, God willing, I see USA win a World Cup in my lifetime. I'm about to turn 50. I've been saying that for a long time, since '94.
Yeah.
So I hope we keep taking steps toward it. I think we are in some respects. But, you see the players individually, the talent is getting better. But comparatively, how do we do in 1994 in the USA World Cup? Are we going to do better than that? Or, are other countries still ahead of us? Like, are we gaining ground? I just don't know. It's a hard one.
No, it's a very tough question. I think it's a question that we should definitely be asking ourselves because, again, we don't have to qualify, but would we be able to qualify? We saw what happened in 2018. So, but my next question is this. The game of soccer in this country it's so all over the place, right? You can go to a park outside, I'm sure, suburban Illinois and see very, very quality soccer and then go a couple miles away and see maybe a little bit less quality soccer. And then it's all that way, these small hot pockets all across the country. Mm-hmm. Talent has gotten tremendously better. But if there is a player in this country and they have a choice between staying here in the U.S. and playing professionally or going across the pond, what do we tell that player? Do we tell them they should go across the pond? Do we tell them that's where they should go? Because right now, the best soccer in this world is still not here, right? It's still not here. And if you want to get the best training, you want the most challenging environment, is it here in the U.S. or is it over there?
That is a really hard question. And I can only say my own experience. When I graduated Northwestern, I went to Germany for 6 months and trained and played with Sport Club Freiburg with their second team, which was Regionalliga back in the day. And those players I was 22, and there was only one other guy who was 22 or older. Everybody else was younger, and these were all future pros, and these were studs. In the States, when I was at the Chicago Stingers or wherever, I was one of the faster guys on the field. Over there, I was one of the slower. So even though that was a third division team, that was the highest level that I ever played with or trained with. So I think for any kid, and now fast forward to now, my 18-year-old who's walking around here, he's a pretty good player. He's going to take a gap year. He's done with high school. He's already done a bunch of college classes online. He's kind of earned this gap year because we've heard from a couple of Division I coaches who say they really like how he plays, but we're not recruiting any 18-year-olds right now. I got 24-year-olds on my roster.
Yeah.
They're straight out of the portal. So he's going to take a gap year, and he's really interested in maybe going, talk about a full circle moment. One of my friends from Sport Club Freiburg is the chairman at FC St. Pauli. And so talking to him about, could he go over there and train with the U19 group? And what he really needs is to find an environment that's very professional and the players are all better than him. And then, because right now he's here, the players he plays with aren't there. And so he just needs to try to leapfrog, and you get those answers, right? Either you sharpen up and you get to be that good, or you don't, and then you figure out what's next for you. But I think it's an individual question. For some people, they may be able to find that here, right?
Yeah.
Because the level is higher. The MLS clubs or the MLS Next Pros are filled with a lot of talented players. But my own personal opinion is. And this makes me sound old school, like an old man, but there was a bunch of us who would rather die than lose and would run through a wall to get the job done.
Thank you again, Andy. A great conversation about coaches taking care of themselves. We also had a chance to talk about the U.S. men's national team, so great conversation. So thank you again, Andy. Who we got coming up next?
We have Luis Robles, former MLS goalkeeper. John, what did you guys talk about?
We had a great conversation. We talked about goalkeeping, and more importantly, when is the right age for a goalkeeper to say, hey, this is what I want to do? A lot of that in that conversation and more coming up here on the other side of the break.
We gon' push it to the limit, we gon' rise together, side by side to the finish. Down the ride forever, when we can ride together. So together we ride, certified. It's together we ride, we gon' push it to the limit. We gon' rise together, side by side to the finish. Down the ride forever, when we can ride together. So together we ride, certified. And together we rise. We gon' push it to the limit. We gon' rise together, side by side, to the finish, down the ride forever.
Because every athlete deserves to be treated like a pro. Henry Ford Sports Medicine.
Boost your brand with NSN's live soccer broadcast, reaching a passionate audience in real time. Engage fans during thrilling soccer matches. Maximize visibility with tailored ad packages. Add 30-second or 60-second commercials for concise, impactful messaging and greater audience connection. Call 586-304-4405 and start your campaign today.
A little bit unique as well as a goalkeeper in how you made your way to the MLS.
Yeah, it is, and I think it's probably becoming a little less that way because the league continues to get bigger and more prominent and really the league of choice. But I grew up in Southeast Arizona, played for Tucson Soccer Academy, went to the University of Portland, and in 2007 when I was done with college, I got drafted by DC United. But instead of signing with DC, I ended up going to Germany and started my professional career there. Spent 6 seasons there before coming back to Major League Soccer in 2012.
No, and long career, right? And a lot of success. But I imagine on some level, too, the trials and tribulations of being a goalkeeper and going across the pond and coming back here and playing in this league. What was that experience like for you? Because obviously playing domestically, going across, it's a different environment altogether. What are those challenges like for you?
Definitely some ups and downs. And sometimes the downs lasted a lot longer than the ups. In the beginning, it was so exciting to be in Germany, and my career actually started out really well. I played for the second team, was on the bench for the first team. We were really competitive, just missed out on promotion to the first Bundesliga. And then the very next year, the keeper in front of me got hurt. I went in for him and actually played out the final 22 games of the season, which then allowed me to get called into the national team. It looked like I could be one of the options for the 2010 World Cup in South Africa. I stayed with the national team all summer. During that time period, the coach that was there previously got fired because of a disagreement with the sporting director. I came back to a completely different situation and I wasn't starting anymore. And that was really challenging, especially since only one goalkeeper plays. And at that level, it's not as if they're making subs and you're looking for that opportunity again. So that year lasted a long time. I missed out on the opportunity to be considered for the 2010 World Cup roster. And then it actually continued to get worse as I went to the next club. And I had some real confidence problems. Some issues were happening just even in my own family life, which led us coming back to Major League Soccer in 2012 because we wanted to be close to family.
Yeah.
We thought my wife's father at the time, he had stage 4 cancer, was going to pass. My dad was really struggling with his health. We thought he was going to pass. We were 7 months pregnant when we showed up. So there was just a lot happening. And with it not going well, I didn't know what was next for me. So then for Major League Soccer to come in and give me an opportunity, give me a chance, another lifeline, I didn't know what to expect. I don't think the Red Bulls knew what to expect. And it went incredibly well. And 8 seasons later, 3 trophies later, a lot of success and a lot of wins later, it ended up being some of the best years of our life. And it just shows in the goalkeeper, professional, player experience, it's not a straight line up. If anything, it's quite jagged with its hills and its valleys. And then you never know how long you're on top of the hill, and you never know how long that valley is going to be. But it really then just comes down to your own personal process, the people around you who's supporting you, and your ability to be resilient and stay committed to that process even when things are not going well.
You know, the goalkeeper in me obviously remembers, as you mentioned, you talked about this, there's only one spot in the field, right? And obviously every team at the highest levels are carrying multiple goalkeepers, right? And so understanding your role. But for a moment, the athlete who's coming up right now, who's maybe 8 or 9 or 10 years old, there's a lot of players that are being put into that specialized position like right now, right? And while I think it might be too young for a player to be a goalkeeper today, what we are asking out of our goalkeepers is so vastly different than what you were like as a goalie when you started, right? Because it was about stopping shots. It was about distribution was part of it, but it's more about long distribution. Now you are in a lot of cases, you're a sweeper, right? You are receiving the ball. You're building from the back. What we're asking the players is completely different. So from your perspective, when it comes to a goalkeeper, and ultimately goalkeeper, that's my role. When is the right age for that? And every player's going to be different, but what is the right age now for a player to say, hey, I want to be a goalkeeper and commit to that role in the development?
This is a great question because it's something that, at least when I'm on the soccer field, I'm with young kids, it's one of my priorities. Meaning that if you're 8 or 9 and you're a goalie, that's fine. You enjoy playing in goal. But you shouldn't be only playing goal. You need to be playing on the field because, much to what you just said, the modern goalkeeper is an extension of the field. And there's certain expectations that come with that goalkeeper that were not placed on our generation. I grew up where you could still throw the ball into the keeper.
Yeah.
Right? That was like part of our play is I'd stand in the goal mouth, and then when they weren't looking, I'd run out to the edge of the 18, they'd throw me the ball, and then you got to reset. My very first year of playing goalie, you could only take so many steps. Like, you couldn't run to the top of the box. I think Jorge Campos had a lot to do with that, but the reason I reference those is a lot has changed. And part of the expectation for goalkeepers is that they have to be really good with their feet. And the only way, or the best way, that a young goalkeeper now can improve that skill set is to also allow themselves to be a field player. And then at 11, 12, 13, really 12 and 13, when they're going through that growth spurt, do they really get a sense of, am I going to fit the profile now? Because there are profiles for each position, but none as stark as goalkeeper. And you seem like you have the height. I'm a short goalie, and I'm 6 feet. So part of my profile is he's short, and I'm 6 feet tall. And so can you imagine an 8 or 9-year-old who still doesn't even know where they're going to end up? So what you can do to ensure your progression is work on all the aspects of goalkeeping, and a huge part of it now is the ability to play with your feet and connect with your teammates. And then the other part, you have a little less control, and you have to give it time. So that's why I think goalkeepers should not be full-time goalkeepers earliest 12, but even push that as long as possible. If you can push that until 13, 14, even 15, where you're splitting, all it does is it gives you options while also developing an important part of your skill set, and that's playing with your feet.
No, it's great. And on the flip side of that, do you feel like every field player should also have a moment in goal? As in the development, right? Getting a chance.
So at younger ages, every player should experience every position. Up top, in the midfield, back line, in goal. And I coached my daughter's U9 rec team this past year. Everyone played every position. I want them to be able to experience everything. And in the beginning of the year, my daughter loved goalie. And maybe part of it is because she sees the pictures of her dad and she gets to wear the different color jersey. By the end of the year, she wanted nothing to do with goal. But the only reason she was able to make that decision is because she got experience in all these different positions, and then she realized she wanted the ball. She wanted to go to goal. And this is why it's so important at the younger age groups. Play every position. Have exposure to all the experiences so that it forms your progression through the game.
There's a mindset, I think, with being a goalkeeper that obviously is vastly different than that of other players. It's just like an NFL quarterback. There's only so many goalkeepers that can play in the league at any given time, right? And so, again, it's the last line of defense, and a lot of times it can be the first line of offense, depending upon where you are in the field and what you're trying to do. But you have these players, again, who are so infatuated with being on that A team, starting, right, being in the 11, how important that is. You had mentioned that you obviously have been a backup at certain points in your career, and that is a very challenging environment. There's a lot of players out there that could be starting on their B team, right, goalkeeper, but they would be sitting on the bench on the A team. What's the message to that player? Obviously, development very important, but again, there's a part of that is, I think, is really crucial to the development of not just a goalkeeper, but any player. Because as a high school junior, I was given the choice: go play and start every game on JV, or because there's 3 goalies who were better than me playing on varsity. I could go play on varsity and be a third-string goalkeeper. And so I made the choice to go to the varsity team because I want to play with the best players. I want to have to see them face the best shots and the fastest shots because those players are better than what I would see on JV. But what's the message to the goalkeeper out there right now that maybe he's in that spot? Maybe they're on that B team. Maybe they're second or third string on their team. How do we help them understand that role and, more importantly, to maybe get through that so they can find their way one day?
So there's 2 things that I would like to talk about specifically. Sure. The first is, let's address the goalkeeper. I never allowed myself to have a backup mentality. Even when I was not playing, even when I knew I wasn't going to play, I approached every single game, whether I was in college and I was a redshirt and I knew I wasn't going to play, like my moment could be right there. And that was part of my process. So that when it was my turn to play, I didn't change anything. And then when there was that moment where I wasn't starting, when I was starting and now I'm on the bench, I wanted to be the best teammate possible.
Thank you, Luis. John, what do we have next?
Yeah, we've got David Sinion, the Director of Education for the United Soccer Coaches. And we had a great conversation, again, about youth development. I did ask him about the U.S. men's national team, so that's coming up.
An aside game in particular, that means 13-year-olds and older, because as the match schedule becomes more and more and more congested, what it squeezes out is time that was typically open for training. And coaches, they modify things, right? So they'll adjust the volume or the intensity or the frequency of training. And what that does is it creates gaps in the development of players because they're not professionals. You can hear managers in the top level of either pro soccer talking about how they, in a schedule where between their domestic pro leagues, their UEFA Champions League conference leagues, they're playing 55, 60 games, maybe more when you look at the teams that were just in the Club World Cup. So what do they have to do? They have to modify training, and they basically get into managing recovery more than anything.
It's an interesting point because I know as a player when I played, there was not an emphasis on recovery, right? It was balls to the wall, so to speak, right? It was you were going as much as an offense as you possibly could. Our coaches would try to get us to throw up as a task at some kind of a hand. Obviously, that's changed completely over the years. But the MLS academies, their whole focus when they were created was to create a more training environment. They were designed for training, and competition was just a way of measuring where they were in their training. Have we seen a shift across all the other levels now within the club and youth environment where we're seeing this more focus on training and then competition, or is it still based on competition?
Well, I think we're fixated on competition. I think the value, when I think back 35 or 40 years, the perceived value of what a coach could do was predicated on the quality of the training environment and then what that could produce in the game environment. But I think now, because training has been so squeezed, that it's more about the coach, what can they do in the game environment, and training has become a little bit more irrelevant or unattached, unfortunately. And I think it's incumbent upon the coaches, because they work with the one product in the game. They work with the players. They're integrally involved in their training and their overall development. Coaches, we need to stimulate them in order to think about and how do they become part of the change and that balance.
No, and that's a fantastic point. And because, again, when we talk about training, and as a former high school coach, I can tell you that we were training oftentimes 5 days a week, right? And so your high school environment, completely different than that of your youth environment, where you might train 3 days a week and have a couple games on a Saturday and Sunday, and then you're back at it again the next week. The college environment is very much the same, right? College environment, you're talking about training, again, 20 hours a week, give or take, and then you have your games. And then there's a specialization as well that takes place, right, where you have your team training. And then if you're a goalkeeper, you go do goalkeeper training, right? So that's another thing you do a couple times a week. If you're a forward, you're going to go get attacking technical training from somewhere else on top of what you're doing at your team level. Let's talk about that for a moment. How is that being handled across the country, and what is the message from you about that and how it can be better handled?
Well, in the college environment, it's very specific, and in the high school environment, because you're playing in a very compressed season. And so what those coaches have learned, and I think smartly so, how do I manage recovery? How do I manage fatigue? Training gets to be one day a week, maybe 1.5 days a week. And the intensity is not the same as if you were playing just one game a week. As far as specialization, I think we're much smarter today about how to train in specific parts of the field per functions. So we can take players and we can train them more positionally, more functionally, more in phase play. And I think it makes more sense because it specifies certain parts of the field and their roles and their responsibilities. But it does take more time. And as you reduce the time frame of training, it becomes more complicated to do those things.
And then specialization at a younger age. I know that a lot of parents want to see maybe their kid play goalkeeper at 7, or 8. And as someone who played goalkeeper, I can tell you that I didn't start playing goalie until I was probably like 11 or 12. So about that for a moment. I know we're talking about 11v11, but by the time a player gets to 11v11, should they already have their position picked, and should they be committed to that position?
No, I think adaptability, training adaptability in the players, and also appreciating that there are aspects of being a multi-sport athlete and having a variety of experiences that really helps a player's development. I remember having this conversation with Brad Friedel about right now, unfortunately, we don't have an elite goalkeeper. This is the first time in a very long time. But between Casey, Brad, and Tim, we had 3. And the one thing that is common amongst them, they were multi-sport athletes. They were basketball players. So I think in terms of specialization, to your point, even beyond the goalkeeper, while we know and we say that specialization is not the correct thing to do, we increasingly probably ask kids to make those decisions and narrow them down probably earlier than we'd like to think we do. And I think whatever works in the European environment, that's fine. But for us, in our history and what works domestically for us, I think multi-sport athletes can turn out to be pretty good players later on.
No, that's a great point. I want to slide over to the U.S. men's national team. You just talked about, obviously, goalkeeping and whatnot. And I asked this question of Andy McDermott here and I'm going to ask everybody that sits down on this couch this weekend, is that if the U.S. men's national team had to qualify for the World Cup, had to. They were not hosting. This current makeup, this current roster, do you think they make it? Do you think they qualify?
I think it's a struggle. And what I remind everybody is that it wasn't that long ago, when I think about the early 1990s, that there were only 2 qualifying spots, and that was always Mexico and whoever else was going to get there. So now that it's 3, and accounting for countries like Panama, Costa Rica, who's been good in the past, Trinidad and Tobago, who's been good in the past. Mexico is not exactly the Mexico of the El Tris that we were familiar with, but I think CONCACAF is hard to qualify in. As hard as it is in CONMEBOL or in UEFA, we have our own kind of testiness about it. And some of this has been brought about. I know now we're preoccupied with how the game looks. If I were the national coach, I would be, look, we need to win, and we need to arrange the players, amass the players, organize them so that we win the games in CONCACAF, and then figure out how we're going to compete at the World Cup level. But right now, we're pretty preoccupied with some of the strengths, or some of the areas that are not particularly our strengths. So I think it would be testy to qualify in this World Cup for us.
And you brought up a great point, because we talk about this a lot in our network. We talk about the style of play that we have now built in this country. The pretty style of play, the technical, possessional base, build from the back, play around with it, and make it look, combination play through the midfield, transitional play. If we look back to the 90s and the early 2000s, that's not how we won soccer games. We won soccer games by being physical, gritty, direct, right? I'm not saying we didn't have possession.
No.
But we found the way to test and challenge back lines in a way that they weren't used to seeing. Because again, if you're Argentina, if you're Brazil, if you're England, you're used to seeing the same kind of style of play. You're used to seeing very similar styles. But coming to here and playing the United States, playing a very direct ball, you're not used to seeing that ball at the back. You're not used to chasing and running onto a ball. Is that a style that we should get back to?
Well, there needs to be balance, and that balance is predicated on what the qualities are in the players. And whether you talk about Pep or you talk about Mauricio Pochettino in our role as the national coach, you can't go out and buy players as a national coach. You can't go buy them. So if you want to play like Argentina, then you're going to have to find some Argentinians that are American citizens that have those qualities. And right now, our national team, what it reflects is everything that those young men have had involved in their development, whether it's youth soccer or the whole process of going abroad when you're 18 years old. I'm not sure that track is giving us a pathway where our players are going to Europe, they're playing, and then coming back, and they're experienced, grizzled professionals. We need to play the way that the players will allow us to play. And if that means that it's not chess on grass with all the elaborateness of game models and those courts, then we have to do what will be successful for us rather than try and fit a square peg in a round hole.
Thank you, David. And I think what everyone's been trying to listen to, who do we have next?
Alexi Lalas. I've had the privilege of sitting down with Alexi 4 times now, 3 virtually, 1 here and in person. And every time I have a chance to talk with him about the game of soccer, I learn something new. And this conversation was no different. I did ask him about players going across the pond and playing. I did ask him about the U.S. men's national team. But a great conversation. And Alexi Lalas is coming up here on the other side of the break.
Please 6 miles, runway 6 break, clear to land.
The Flint City Bucks are Michigan's top soccer franchise with 4 national championships, 9 conference titles, and 15 Great Lakes Division titles. They have produced 107 players for Major League Soccer, and they focus on attracting top talent and shaping soccer's future. Michigan Bucks Academy joins MLS Next new competition tier starting in September of 2025. This offers elevated levels of play and flexibility for high school participation. The Academy will provide premier development, high-performance training, and exposure to scouts through regional tournaments and MLS Next events. For more information on tryouts, training programs, and key updates as we prepare for our first season in MLS Next new tier, visit MichiganBucksAcademy.com.
Are you ready to create unforgettable moments for your audience? NSN offers professional live streaming and full broadcast services tailored to your needs. From high-quality production to exceptional coverage, we ensure your game or event becomes a spectacle to remember. Book your next game with us today. Call 586-304-4405 to schedule your broadcast and let NSN bring the action to life like never before.
Get off that plane. Like when you get into Michigan, is there a place that you have to go to first outside of the home?
So I grew up in Birmingham. I went to Cranbrook. I went to Hunter House the other day, which is in Birmingham. Wonderful hamburgers, so I had to do that. I walked around Cranbrook. I walked around kind of the old haunts. I don't have any family here anymore, but I walked around a lot of different places. A lot has changed over the years, but it's still there's something about coming home that never changes, and the people have been wonderful, and I don't get back enough. So when I get an opportunity, and obviously, with this opportunity, I was like, yeah, I'm definitely coming.
So we're here for the North American Soccer Expo, and this is its first year ever. And so far, what are your thoughts of being here and being a part of this process?
So I like to be on the ground floor. I mean, I remember way back when we started MLS, and you get very few chances to kind of be there at the beginning. And so that was what was kind of cool. Yesterday we did the ribbon cutting and kind of the opening ceremony, if you will. And you got to have someone with vision, and Mr. Tinian has vision in terms of what he's doing. I didn't realize that this complex here in Novi existed, and it's pretty impressive in terms of what you can do. And as we know, soccer is growing, and what better way to celebrate it than bringing people together? I've already met so many people from not just Michigan, but all over the place that have recognized this as a value proposition. And, I hope it grows and gets bigger and more people come in, not just to see Novi and see Michigan, but to celebrate soccer and Michigan soccer, which is obviously near and dear to my heart.
No, absolutely. And, obviously as a presenter, you were here last night for the ribbon cutting of this first ever edition of the North American Soccer Expo. Obviously, as a Fox analyst on the soccer side, you have a chance to see soccer in many different ways, but mostly at the professional, international levels. There's a lot of amateur soccer, a lot of youth soccer that takes place in pockets of Michigan, all across this country. And you see, how much involved are you in that aspect of the game of soccer as a fan?
Not as much. I'm obviously at a kind of a 30,000-foot level a lot when we're talking about it. But I not only recognize, but I respect that there is this incredible ecosystem that exists, and these wonderful men and women that each and every day do the hard work and the heavy lifting. And it's been interesting for me to see how the way youth soccer in particular, and youth soccer development, which is something we talk about a lot, the vilifying of those in youth soccer and the men and women that have chosen to use soccer as their means of making a living. And somehow this notion that it should be a charity or altruistic or this benevolence should follow what is ultimately a capitalistic type of enterprise. And I don't think that that's right. I also don't think that it's fair. We never complain. It goes back to pay to play and all these people that are leeching off of the unassuming American soccer player and parents out there. No, you're providing a service that people obviously want, that people will pay money for, and if you provide a really, really good service, more and more people will do it. And so I don't begrudge them. I actually celebrate the people that are able to make a living. And let's be honest, there's also a lot of people that do it for very little money, very little power or attention out there, and they do it for kind of the love of the game, but it doesn't mean that they shouldn't make money. It also doesn't mean that they shouldn't make as much money as possible if they're putting out a good product.
No, and it makes a ton of sense. And I've asked this question a lot lately of the youth athlete, so to speak, the up-and-comer, right? We've seen the likes of Christian Pulisic. We saw you go across the pond and play soccer internationally and then came back, obviously, domestically towards, in part of your career. The player today, the 18-year-old who is offered the opportunity to go across the pond and offered the opportunity to play domestically, right now, I'd imagine is overwhelmingly in favor. If you can get across the pond and go play, you're probably going to go. But how do we bridge that gap as a nation? Because that's an area where, granted, I understand that there's significant differences in how we play soccer and how they play soccer across the pond. But how do we bridge that gap where an athlete, a soccer player here, wants to stay here, wants to play here, and doesn't feel the need to have to go there to get better?
Yeah. So a couple things. Number one, if your only ambition and desire, and I totally understand and respect that for many it is to play in Europe, that's fine. If that's all you want to do, there are flights leaving from JFK and from LAX and hell from Detroit Metro every hour on the hour. But just because you set foot on Europe doesn't necessarily make you a better soccer player. We talk about the 90 minutes, but the other 22 and a half hours are really important. So getting to a place where, number one, you're going to play, where you're comfortable. It might be a different country, a different culture, different language. Who knows? You might have a wife, a girlfriend, a family, whatever it ends up being. They have to be able to assimilate. It's not always easy. So my point is that the grass is not always greener, and so you really have to be careful. And the other thing is, as you know, it's about development, right, and progression. And you might be better served from playing in Major League Soccer. And then at some point, maybe if you want to make that move, that's great, or maybe you don't. Maybe this is where you are going to be at your best. But it goes back to something I know we've talked about before, about this insecurity that we have of who we are or who we aren't when it comes to a soccer-playing nation. We should be absolutely unapologetic. It doesn't mean we're perfect. We absolutely have flaws out there. But this inferiority complex that seems to permeate through American soccer, I think, informs a lot of the stuff that you were talking about out there. I don't know how to fix it other than time, or me screaming and yelling and you screaming and yelling and saying, hey, we're a whole lot better than people realize. And when you look at the progress of soccer, because obviously we're coming, less than a year away from the 2026 World Cup. We look back, what will be 32 years from the 1994 World Cup. It is night and day how much it's changed. And it's fundamental changes both on and off the field. And we should be very, very proud. Sometimes we kick ourselves for what we haven't done, and sometimes we also have to pat ourselves on the back for how far we have come and what we actually are.
No, it makes perfect sense, and that leads me to my next question, because you mentioned the World Cup, and we're talking obviously about starting 11s and who's making the roster here in 26. And if we could find a way to take Diego Luna and multiply him on our roster, is that something that we would want? I mean, I feel like we need 11 of him on the field.
Yeah, so part of me looks at the Luna phenomenon, of whatever we're going to call it here, that happened over the summer, because we've known Diego Luna, but he kind of had his glow up this summer, and rightfully so, and fairly so. Part of me looks at it as, this is great. This is a guy that's kind of permeated through, and the way he plays and the way he looks, all that kind of stuff. And the other part of me is like, this is where we've come, where a guy just showing that he actually cares and wants to, kind of run through a wall. That's what we get excited about. Like, that should be a constant. We shouldn't be screaming and yelling about something like that, and yet this is where we are. That's what's concerning to me, but I love the fact that maybe Diego Luna kind of embodies what Pochettino wants for his team. And I'm not saying that Diego Luna is necessarily the greatest thing since sliced bread, or even is going to start with this team or even be with this team, but at least there's kind of a shape of what obviously fans gravitate to, but I also think what Mauricio Pochettino kind of wants. And if you can have some of that ingrained in some of these other players that are incredibly talented and skilled, now we're cooking. But time's a ticking.
Well, it is a ticking, and it's something that I think we've actually talked about as well on one of our previous shows, about this mentality of the style of play that we play currently. And I was talking with Dave Simeon yesterday, from the Director of Coaching for Education for United Soccer Coaches, and we talked about this, about how pretty has become like this thing that we're more concerned about versus just winning, right? And we want it to look pretty while we're doing it, which, again, I can tell you how many times I saw an ugly Clint Dempsey goal, but it counted, right? It still counts, right? And are we more concerned as a nation about having really pretty soccer, or just being gritty and going out there and trying to win?
Yeah, we're all a bunch of romantics now. I think that gets into a bigger question of what is pretty. and we all have different definitions of ultimately what is pretty. And so when I think about the game and what it can be, and even talking to people around here, if I ask them what pretty soccer is, I'm going to get a bunch of different answers. And so I hesitate to use the word problem. It's just a reality of our country right now when we're talking about what's going on. But I will tell you this, when it comes to the World Cup, when it comes to the U.S. men's national team, or the women's national team for that matter, I don't think the American soccer public, I don't think the American soccer public in general, or public in general, gives a crap about how this team plays as long as they win. If we pulled a Greece Euros type of thing that happened years ago where you just bend but don't break, or for that matter, if we pulled we just saw the England women's national team win the Euros, and they just, it wasn't pretty all the time, and there was some luck. You got to have the soccer god smile upon you. That would be fine. I just think it's really, really difficult to say this is how we're going to play as America when we don't have that historic tradition. And we have so many competing ideas about what we actually want to look like on the field.
Again, it's a great point, and I couldn't agree with you more. It's one of those things where I look at the game and how it's developed here over the years in this country. We're such a big nation. Jen Klein was talking about that as well, how big we are, and I think we forget about how big we are because there's so much geography to cover in this country, and being able to find the right player, the right talent. We always say this, it's not the best player; it's the right player, right? Because I think that the best player sometimes isn't the right player, and can be a cancer in a team.
Yeah, I mean, remember a couple of years ago when Iceland had its moment, right? And everyone was like, well, if Iceland can do it, then why can't we? And it is that proverbial apples and oranges type of thing. You mentioned this size. I mean, literally the size of our country means that in one area of the country, somebody is playing like this relative to, it could be the weather, it could be the population that they're living in, it could be their heritage, whatever it ends up being. And then another side of the country, they're playing in a completely different way, and they think about the game in a completely different way, and that's difficult. Just in and of itself. Then you add the fact that soccer isn't king in our country, and we haven't had that type of tradition relative to the other sports, and it makes it very, very difficult. And I've met so many coaches here, and they each individually have to decide how they want to play in order to win. And again, you're going to have an incredible disparity and difference and diversity of opinion as to how you're going to play, and that's just kind of who we are.
So tonight, I don't know if you knew this or not, but in the USL League 2, it's a national championship game.
Okay.
Right? And it's Ballard FC, which is based on the West Coast in the Seattle area, against a little small town called Vermont Green, based in Vermont.
Yes.
It's made up mainly of the national championship Vermont side that won here this past fall.
Right.
It's going to be they're actually saying it's going to be the biggest and most covered USL League 2 game in the history of the league. My question for you is, first off, do you know anything about these two teams?
Well, if it's Vermont, then obviously from a collegiate perspective, we know how good they were.
Yep.
We also know that there were very, very few Americans on the team. I don't know if that translates to the professional side of it too, but I'm assuming a lot of them are playing here. So, and that's neither here nor there. It's just a reality of the makeup of the team. So that's what first jumps into mind when I'm talking about. The second part of it is that I know that MLS and NWSL get a lot of attention, and rightfully so, but there is so much, as you know, professional soccer out there. And the credit needs to be given to whether it's USL or anybody else out there, because this is not an easy culture to come into and to compete in, because ultimately this is a business that is trying to compete. But what I think it does show is that when teams in smaller markets when smaller markets have teams, they gravitate to the game and the experience of the game that we know that kind of just gets in and eats away in the best possible way, and the sport ultimately, and that translates into people wanting to have those moments, wanting to celebrate the game, wanting to celebrate their community through the lens of soccer, and as we know, that's what professional soccer oftentimes can do, regardless of what level it is.
Thank you, Lexi, for that amazing, wonderful conversation. And John, who do we have next?
Amazing and wonderful in the same sentence. You have something good when you say those two words in succession, mind you. Paul Tinian, who is the founder of the inaugural North American Soccer Expo. I had a chance to sit down with him on Sunday, recapping the weekend, what went well and what they can learn from, all that and more coming up here on the other side of the break. chance to talk, obviously, before the Expo, but now that it's getting closer to its end here, recap this weekend and how it's gone.
Yeah, it's been amazing. Exceeded our expectations for sure. Yeah, we started off on Friday with the some good sessions and a party and ribbon cutting with Alexi and Justin, the mayor of Novi, and then had some great sessions yesterday, both on the field and the classroom, and capped off yesterday with the Killer Flamingos and go-karts and all kinds of fun stuff last night, and and we just continue today. It's been great. The presenters have been unbelievable, and the feedback's been great, and we couldn't be happier. It's been great.
You know, we talk a lot about, at least in my world, we talk about forward thinking and moving the ball forward in soccer, right? And we've heard it through the presenters here about having a forward-thinking mindset. And and what you've done with this North American Soccer Expo is exactly that, and what we need more of in this country. Yeah. I want you to talk about what led to this in the first place, because I think that is the foundation of why this is even happening in the first place. Is I think the biggest thing that we need to hear from you right now.
Yeah, I think first of all, the United Coaches Convention, the national convention, has always been such a huge event, and it's had a huge impact on a lot of people in this country. And I remember as a young coach, I used to go copy sessions, come back to my teams, and then try to use those sessions, sort of the information that you can pick up. And I think that's what we do as coaches. You steal things that you see that you like, and so. And as you get older, it becomes more of networking. You'd see people that you haven't seen in a long time. Maybe once a year, you'd see them at the convention. You catch up, have a bite to eat or a beer or whatever it is. And so what we wanted to do here is we wanted to give everybody here in Michigan, especially, a chance to do it here and have it be cheaper, have it be more accessible. There's a lot of people that that work 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and or don't have the resources to spend the money to travel. And so we wanted to bring it here to Michigan. And we didn't want it just to be a state convention or state expo. We wanted to have a national flavor, and that's why we brought in so many great presenters from all over the country. And I think the confidence came from, Mark Zathy, who joined our organization a couple years ago, started a club summit, and we did a lot of coaching education, some meetings. We would get our groups together, and then as we talked about needing something here in Michigan for everybody, we decided to take a run at it. And I think it's something that's been needed for a while. It's something that we know is going to be something that happens every year, and we're going to build on it. And we want people in soccer in Michigan and around the surrounding states and hopefully all over the country that realize this is a place, not the place, but one of the places to go for great education, great social interaction. And I think the main thing for us is that we want this to be inclusive. I think sometimes in soccer, you're a GA club, you're an MLS club, you're an ESNL, you're US Youth, and we want to celebrate everybody, and we want everybody to be a part of what we're doing moving forward with this.
Obviously in the name, it's called the North American Soccer Expo. You were not thinking small in the name, right? Because, you could have called it the Midwest Soccer Expo. If you wanted to just go after the Midwest, you obviously chose to go to North American Soccer, which I think is a great name for what you're trying to do here, because you're trying to gather soccer minds and soccer enthusiasts from all around the country to come here and be a part of this. Looking at what happened here in year one in this inaugural event, looking forward to the future, what do you think this will become or could become here in the future?
Yeah, I think to say there's only been a couple of people who have called me crazy for trying this would be an understatement. We toyed with a lot of different names, right? The Michigan Soccer Expo, you're right, the Midwest, and we said, you know what? We want this to be a national event, so let's call it that. Let's do it. And you know what? I don't know how many states we have represented. I would say it's probably at least 25 different states where we have at least an attendee. We did. It's a national event. We've got people from all over the country. And what I hope this turns into is great education, both on the field and in the classroom. And I think hopefully a place for people to connect and work on uniting everybody in this country. I think, it's a big undertaking, but let's have a place where it's a safe space for everybody. everybody that's involved in the game can come learn and share ideas. And I think the other thing is, as we learned last night, there was a lot of different people that maybe hadn't seen each other in a long time that just had a fun. And when we look at the game, as you get older, you think about why you do this, and the first thing that everybody goes back to is it's fun. And I think, you get into competitions, you get into the business side of the game, you get into competing with each other, you get into, having rivalries with clubs, and, you lose sight of it sometimes. And I think this weekend for me, and I know for a lot of other people, has been fun. And that's got to be the core. It's got to be the root of what you do. So.
Well, last night everyone had a chance to escape the Expo Hall and get out and have some fun. You mentioned the Pink Flamingos. Talk about that, because that is just as important part of this, what happens inside these doors, inside this building, but also what happens outside, where you get a chance to all come together, kind of be a little more loose and just try to enjoy the night for what it is.
Yeah, I mean, the Killer Flamingos are amazing. They've been a staple in the entertainment industry here in Michigan for quite some time. And when we say that we were bringing in so many great people, bringing Alexi Lawless back, and everybody gets excited, and Peter Vermees, and John Hackworth, and the list goes on and on. When you talk to people around here and you say, "Oh, it's the Killer Flamingos," I mean, almost everybody goes, "Oh my God, yeah, they're great. I've seen them play." And so, yeah, I think it was a great, like you said, escape. And I think, you get together, you talk soccer, you hang out, but there's so many other conversations about life and family and travel and stuff outside the game that I think when you share with people, you start to form more relationships, and and you reconnect. I mean, I was with a couple of people last night I hadn't seen in years. My dad has been involved in soccer in Michigan for a long time, and to see him here and reconnect with some of the guys that he coached with the Rockers was a lot of fun last night. Roger Faulkner was here, who has been involved in soccer as long as my dad has, if not longer, here in Michigan. And, he's involved in the World Cup. He was involved in the Detroit Express. I mean, just seeing those guys together, I know that it means a lot when they get to, when they reconnect and they see each other. And so, we do get a little too excited, I think, about the rivalries and the competition and club versus club and who's doing what. And at the end of it, it's to put those barriers aside and just enjoy each other and have fun was amazing.
Thank you, Paul. I thought it was a wonderful event, and a lot of good came out of it. John, what were your takeaways?
Yeah, I mean, I think just like what you said, it was a wonderful event. I mean, when you get a lot of different people who are in the soccer community together into a space to celebrate the game, to learn, and to network, I think those are all great things that come from events like this. And it's something that in this soccer environment in the United States is much needed. And I'm glad that Paul Tinian and the North American Soccer Expo are in fact doing this, and look forward to what comes here in the future. I want to thank our production team for being a part of this last week. Ryan, again, it was a great time here learning not only about this event, but what it could become in the future. And again, if it's your first time stopping by here on the National Soccer Network, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like us, and share this with your friends and family. And more importantly, keep coming back for more. We have a lot of really cool and exciting things coming your way, not only in regards to this type of reporting, but all the other things that we do here at the National Soccer Network. But I'm Jonathan Turner. That's Ryan Glinski. Thank our production team. Have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll see you next time here on the National Soccer Network.
Are you ready to create unforgettable moments for your audience? NSN offers professional live streaming and full broadcast services tailored to your needs. From high-quality production to exceptional coverage, we ensure your game or event becomes a spectacle to remember. Book your next game with us today. Call 586-304-4405 to schedule your broadcast and let NSN bring the action to life like never before.